All right, John, we're live.
Yeah, for some reason, Jared's mic cut out.
Yeah,
I
for
got
crying
no
out, Jared, what the
over
hell's
here.
going on over there?
The hell, Jared is our guy, folks, that does all of the dancing bulls and bears and snowboarding bears, and usually most of the sounds. But for whatever reason, yeah, that like that. But for whatever reason, I didn't hear it anything. But luckily, we're ready to rock, and you are tuned in to the Rebel's Edge, which comes your way, of course, at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. We appreciate all of you joining us. Thank you so much. Pete Najarian, my brother over there, back in Minnesota, where he has a house, versus Florida, where we're not so sure. Sorry,
It don't look good. It does not look good right now. Jeez. When the road that goes to your home is gone, that tends to be a bad sign, it seems like, John. I don't know. That's just the experience of two hurricanes in the last year.
Yeah. Wow.
Oh,
And
well.
for an area that probably hadn't had them in decades, Pete,
Right. Yeah.
as far as reaching that side of Florida, the Gulf side. But, well, folks, we appreciate you tuning in. We always start the show off with the macro minute. So let's dive in. Pete, I'm going to say the data showed China's services index fell to the lowest level in 8 months. This is 3, folks. If I lay it sideways, that's 8. So that revived worries about the economy, Pete. They are the second largest economy on earth. So that's one of the reasons that the markets were a little iffy when we started off today.
Well, John, as you and I both know, the data does matter, even though we've heard opposite of that, which is ridiculous. But that being said, I'm going to hit you with the treasuries again, John. I know I keep hitting it, but the reality is we've bounced now. The treasuries ran to the upside. We had the 10-year moving very, very rapidly. We had the 2-year moving up and over 5. It's approaching 5 right now as we speak. It's not there yet for the 2-year, but the 10-year is off and running again. So keep an eye on those. Those are definitely an indicator of people and what they want to do with their money and shifting it around. So that and the dollar, which has exploded to the upside, are things to keep your eye on.
Yeah. Well, now, folks, we are happy to treat you with fantastic futures.
Fantastic futures.
And Pete, I'm going to throw this one out to you on Fantastic Futures. Crude reality. And the crude reality is that JP Morgan says that US dollar is losing its influence in oil markets and that more and more people are trading it in yen and even rubles, believe it or not, Pete. But yen is dominating, and that is a worrisome thing, but keep an eye on it, folks.
I got to piggyback on with you, John. I think it's very, very important. We all have watched this price of crude go up, up, up. And why is that? Well, the Saudis and the Russians both, with some of the cutbacks that they've been doing, 300,000 for the Russians, 1 million barrels from the Saudis, and they've extended it. So to your point, John, why is it going up to 86, 87? Matter of fact, we got to 87.60, pulled back, and now we're right back up there again. So I think that if you don't think oil prices are at their highs, I think there's still room. This thing's got a lot more room, I think, to run. If we get into a pickle, they're really going to start sprinting to the upside.
Oh, yeah, that's one of those dangerous things, Pete. And it's one of the reasons we certainly hoped that we wouldn't see the dollar losing its competency in world markets. But apparently, even though the dollar's higher, it is. All right, Pete. Let's talk a little bit about Airbnb, because ABNB, the symbol for Airbnb, is up fairly strong on a weekday in the markets. It's going to be added to the S&P 500 on September 18th. The same thing, Pete, for Blackstone, symbol BX. So maybe you'd like to tell people why, when you add something to the S&P 500, people buy it.
Yeah, people all want to be a part of something, John. And when you get added into something like the S&P or whatever it might be, it's just one more check mark that you've got, because those folks that are actually balanced to that whole thing have got to buy it themselves. So we're looking at that. We're looking at Blackstone making a move, as you said. I think it was 4 or 5% to the upside, but I think the Airbnb one is very interesting, John, because you look at the year-to-date, stocks up like 67%. But on top of that, the travel demand continues to be there. And with that, we are seeing margins expanding and expanding and expanding for Airbnb. So there's a lot of positives. On their last earnings report, they did beat on top, beat on the bottom, and they talked about the profitability. So for all those reasons, John, this makes a lot of sense right now.
Well, I think people buy them, Pete, like you say, the funds have to buy them. And a lot of other people figure, hey, if they're going to be part of the S&P 500, Now let's talk about Manchester United, Pete, MANU. And I know you and I have had puts in this thing all year long, for the most part. And sometimes people give me crap on Twitter about it, and they say, oh, it's going to get taken out at 30. Not so much, because the Glazer family, which owns Manchester United, yes, it's publicly traded, but nonetheless, they are the controlling interest. They say that they are going to take the sale of the club off the market. So the stock is slamming to the downside right now, Pete. It was down 10%, 15%. Now it's down 20%.
Last I looked, it was down 16%. So it's gotten even worse. John, the Glazer family, people have their own opinions, but most people seem to not like these guys. It's just the way that it is. And they, for a variety of reasons, they also own the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I'll tell you, what they do with this whole Manchester United, they wanted a price. The price was not what people were willing to pay. And I think it was 10 billion, whatever, John. I mean, it was one of these things where they were literally reaching for the sky and nobody wanted to reach with them. So it's 10 billion pounds. And I just wonder, are they looking for too much more? They pulled it as everybody's talking about. Supposedly they're going to come back in 2025 and see if there's anything better then. But for right now, John, it makes sense to me. At what point does this start to happen? Maybe even in the NFL, the NBA, the NHL, where those prices don't always go up. And right now they continue to, it's TV money. It's great. But at some point that's going to stop. I don't know when that is, but they don't like the Glazers either. So that's sort of feeding into this thing as well.
You bet. I think the fans would like to see them gone.
Yep.
But right now it's the stock that's gone, Pete. It's gone from, close to 30 earlier in the year, all the way down now under $19 a share. Yep. Ouch. All right. Now we've got a cloud-based tech play for healthcare. That's NextGen, NXGN, Pete. And this one, Thoma Bravo, was making a bid for the company, and the private equity firm said that they could announce a deal this week for the company. Shares are up, not as much as the highs of the day, but again, the market's soft, but they're still up better than 7%, Pete.
Yeah, this is a company, John, where you look at the earnings, that looks great. When you look at across the board, this is a company that's really in good shape. So it's understandable that there are others that might be looking at this. And I think that's part of what we're seeing here. Is there other private equities? Is there other entities out there that might want to, maybe kick the tires a little bit as well? It's pretty interesting. We're seeing a nice elevation of this stock. It's an incredible company. They do a lot of incredible things, John. And I think it's something where we might see another bidder join. But time will tell. But this is definitely something that's getting a nice lift today, for sure.
Yeah, turnover of shares, folks, quite high indeed, because, Pete and I always look at unusual. Well, normal turnover for this thing's about 400,000 shares. It's approaching 1.1 million already, and we'll see exactly how the rest of it plays out. All right, Pete, I got one more for you, and that is Zai Lab, cool. ZLAB. It's a Shanghai-based company, and Zai Lab, I believe is how they pronounce it, but ZLAB is the symbol, Zai Lab. So it's up big again. Last week, Pete, it was a $22 stock. This week, it's pushing up towards 30. They've got a breakthrough therapy designation from the Chinese equivalent of the FDA. They call theirs the Center for Drug Evaluation. And that's pretty good news for ZLAB shareholders.
Yeah, John, when you look at this company and you've already got 5 drugs that are already commercially out there, but you've got 50 more drugs in the pipeline. This is a company that's building very rapidly and having a little bit of success, which is great for all of us, of course. So it's something that I think is very important. We keep an eye on it. They got a great balance sheet. Do they have a few things that are maybe some holes in there? Maybe a little bit. But this is a company that's got plenty of cash. The free cash flow burn is relatively high, so keep an eye on that. It doesn't have a whole lot of short interest here, though. And this is a company that's pretty daggone solid, I would say. So I think it's well worth watching these guys, especially because that pipeline is so massive, John. I mean, 50 different types of therapies are sitting there right now. And that's pretty daggone impressive.
Yeah, you put enough chips on the table, Pete, and you're going to have a winner with some of them. And hopefully this is one for these solid tumors and so forth. All right, let's dive in, Pete, to sports, because what a crazy weekend in college sports and pro sports. But let's start off with college sports, shall we?
Well, let's hit a little college football, John. I mean, a lot of people don't know this, but the Colorado Buffalo won the national championship this weekend. I mean, it was absolutely incredible.
They crowned their ass.
Crown them.
If you want to crown them, then crown their ass.
See, the world has crowned them. They've played one game, and they were against a ranked opponent, John. Everybody is on the bandwagon. Deion is this, Deion is that. Let me tell you something. I love Deion Sanders. So do you.
Too.
He brought in 87 players from the portal this year, the most of any school in the country. That being said, let's see. TCU is a ranked team that lost the starting quarterback who was up for the Heisman, lost the receiver who was considered one of the best receivers in college football, lost the running back that was one of the best running backs in college football, lost a bunch of guys on the O-line, the defense, the linebackers, but they're ranked. So because of the fact that Colorado beat them, now all of a sudden we crowned them. I mean, we literally have crowned them the winner of the national title. Everybody ought to
crown them, then crown their ass.
Everybody ought to move themselves around, right? Because now, in fairness, his son threw for 500 yards. He threw up for a bunch of touchdowns. It was like a video game. But, John, they won 45-42. There was no defense played in this game. I mean, it was just a matter of who had the ball last was going to win this game. But as excited as I am for Deion, and I think he should be proud of his son, this is one game against a team that we have no idea if they might even win 3 games this year, right? I mean, the reality is that. So, well, John, TCU's ranked, but they lost everybody. I mean, they lost the team. And meanwhile, we're reacting as if they beat last year's team with the Heisman Trophy winner, or a quarterback rather, and the wide receiver and the running back and all of the other players. They're not. It's a different team. So I think people have to actually step back. I have one thing that I got to ask you about this game, though.
Okay.
So Travis Hunter, one of the best players in all of college football, high school football, he was ranked in the top whatever, right? 5 maybe. Well, here's the issue I have, and I love Deion Sanders, but he's got to be careful with this kid. The kid played 129 plays in one game in 98-degree temperature. Now, he's young, of course, and blah, blah, blah. But, John, I think you got to monitor something like that, and I don't think you want to have – he made plays. He made, he's a great defensive back. He's an unbelievable receiver. But Deion's going to have to be very, very careful with this guy, because I think you can burn out a guy. Anybody heard of Ohtani? Because as much as we love him, maybe the pitching and hitting and everything else was a little much. I tell you what, he had 129 snaps. That's 2 games, John. That's 2 games in one. If he does that all year, this kid's going to be an old man by the time he turns 22 and goes to the NFL.
Well, Pete, that guy, you're right. He's an exceptional player, because we've not seen anybody, not even Deion himself, put in that kind of yeoman's work, even though he was capable, of course, both as a punt returner, as a receiver, and obviously he was, all world as a defensive back when he was down there at Florida State. And he did fantastically in the pros. Now, this kid, Hunter, is an exceptional player. I encourage you guys, go to my Twitter account or Pete's, because I think he was retweeting a lot of my tweets about Hunter and about Shedeur Sanders, both of whom had, career games. and I don't disagree with you, Pete, but I'm going to point out a couple things. A, they played on the road, so they played at TCU. So you're right. The heat was a factor. What worked in his favor, and maybe why Dion left Coach Prime, left him out there, Pete, was you're coming down from 6,000 feet to sea level. I think that played into it, Pete, because he was probably thinking, you know what, we practice, we do wind sprints up here at 6,000 feet. We come down here, it's like, I feel fresh the whole game. Now, he's probably hurting after the game, no doubt. But as he said, I think he's talked about having a hot tub on the plane for him, Pete. Dion was talking about it. But I just loved that Coach Prime lit up all the doubters, because obviously there are some pretenders. There was Debo Sweeney over at Clemson who got trounced by Duke. There's Brian Kelly down at LSU getting trounced by Florida State. There are some pretenders that didn't deserve these rankings. That's pretty clear, that people are judging them just like, our friend, crown him. Just
If you
like
want to crown them, then crown their ass.
That's right, crown him.
It's one of the greatest ever.
That might have been, other than playoffs. Other than that, that might be one of the greatest quotes ever out of a pro coach's mouth. Or Ditka's, Pete, when he told that fan, here's my address. You come down here and see me, and I'm going to whip your ass. But I do agree, though, that you don't want to burn out these kids. So, Dion, Coach Prime, please cut him back to 100 plays. That's all we're asking for, just 100 plays.
They should monitor it. I'm glad you went there, though, John, because it just shows you, too, when you recruit five-star guys, they don't always play five-star football. He's got that quarterback, one of the top quarterbacks in the whole country 2 years ago. As a runner, as a thrower, he didn't look nearly as good as the kid over on the other side at Duke, by the way. So, you're right. I mean, I'll tell you what, Clemson got outplayed. And LSU, Florida State, Florida State wasn't ranked. I think they're going to be ranked. LSU might slide a little bit, John, but what happened in that? What's that?
A little?
What happened in that game was a lot to do with the fact that they could not convert third and fourth down. So that was a major problem. Last thing we're going to hit is Royce Lewis, John. We don't even have to talk much about him, other than the fact that he had a third grand slam in 8 games. In 8 games, the guys hit 3 grand slams. I mean, when the Twins drafted him, they told everybody this kid is special. He's unreal. I think they might not have even given him enough credit, because this guy's on fire. When he's healthy, he's great.
All right. Well, folks, thanks for joining us. We will be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Have a great day, and please tell a friend about the show, and we'll see you tomorrow.